They said I was street garbage, said I didn't belong at that table with my own husband. That blonde woman thought she could humiliate me because I came from nothing. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just his wife. I was the one signature that's standing between her man and his billion-dollar dream. Before I tell you how I made them all pay, let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Gabrielle Thompson, and I'm a corporate attorney. But that title doesn't tell you half of my story. I grew up in Detroit, in a neighborhood where gunshots were our nightly lullaby and dreams felt like luxuries we couldn't afford. My mama raised me and my two brothers by herself, working double shifts at a hospital just to keep the lights on. We ate cereal for dinner more times than I can count. I wore the same 3 outfits to school on rotation until they literally fell apart. But Mom always told me one thing. She'd grab my face with both hands, look me dead in the eyes and say, "Baby girl, your circumstances don't define your destiny. You define your destiny." I held on to those words like a lifeline. I studied by street light when our electricity got cut off. I worked at a grocery store after school, saved every penny, and put myself through community college, then law school. I passed the bar on my first try. I clawed my way out of that poverty, and I did it with my head high and my dignity intact. That's where I was 5 years ago when I met Luca DeLuca. Luca isn't what you'd call typical. His family built their empire in the shadows, not the spotlight. The man owns half the waterfront properties in Boston, controls businesses most people don't ask questions about. When I met him at a legal consultation for one of his holdings, he didn't see a poor girl from Detroit. He saw me, the brilliant woman I'd become. We talked for hours that night, not about money or power, but about justice, about loyalty, about what really matters in life. He fell in love with my mind before anything else. We got married 3 years ago, and honestly, it's been beautiful. Luca never made me feel less than because of where I came from. He celebrated it. He said my struggle made me stronger, wiser, more resilient. He said that's why he chose me. And I believed him because his actions matched his words. Until that dinner, until I learned that not everyone in his world saw me the way he did. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. Luca came into my home office, his presence filling the doorway. He moved like he always did, deliberate and controlled, every step purposeful. He told me about a development project he'd been working on for months. A luxury waterfront complex, high-end condos, retail spaces, restaurants, $2 billion. His business partner was a man named Brandon Mitchell, another developer who'd been working with Luca on various deals for years. Brandon wanted to celebrate the project launch over dinner, all 4 of us. Luca, me, Brandon, and Brandon's girlfriend, Courtney. I remember feeling a twist in my stomach when Luca mentioned her name. Courtney Blake. I'd never met her, never even heard of her. But something about the way Luca said it, flat and dismissive, made me pause. "What's she like?" I asked. Luca's dark eyes met mine. "Doesn't matter." That should have been my first warning, but I told him we'd go. How bad could it be? The restaurant was one of those places where they don't put prices on the menu. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, servers moving like shadows. Luca and I arrived first. He wore a charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, a gold signet ring on his right hand catching the candlelight. We were seated at a private table in the back corner, away from prying eyes. The kind of table reserved for people who preferred discretion. Brandon walked in first. Tall, confident, wearing an expensive smile. He shook Luca's hand with careful respect, kissed my cheek, called me the brilliant Gabrielle. I started to relax. Then Courtney arrived. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Tall, blonde, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my first car. But it wasn't her looks that got me. It was her eyes, the way they slid over me like I was part of the furniture, then locked onto Luca like he was water and she'd been wandering in the desert. She barely nodded when Brandon introduced us. Didn't shake my hand, didn't smile, just said hi in a flat voice and sat down across from Luca. Not across from Brandon, across from my husband. Luca's expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten slightly. He reached under the table and squeezed my hand once, a silent message, "I'm here." The first 20 minutes were small talk. Brandon going on about the project, Luca asking pointed questions, in that low, controlled voice of his. I sipped my wine, trying to ignore the way Courtney kept staring at my husband. Then she turned her attention to me, and honestly, I wish she'd kept ignoring me. "So, Gabrielle," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Where did you go to school?" I told her proudly. "Community college, then law school." The look on her face was like I told her I got my degree from a cereal box. "Community college?" She laughed, a sharp, mean sound. "How resourceful of you." The way she said resourceful, you'd think she meant pathetic. Luca set down his glass. The sound was soft, but it cut through the conversation like a blade. "Gabrielle built her career from nothing," he said quietly. "That takes more strength than buying your way in." His voice was calm, almost pleasant, but there was something underneath it, something cold and dangerous that made the server pause mid-pour. Courtney didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did and thought she was untouchable. She started asking about my family, where I grew up, what my parents did. Every question felt like a trap, like she was building a case to prove I didn't belong there. When I mentioned my mama was a hospital worker, Courtney actually laughed again. That same sharp, cruel sound. The wine kept flowing and Courtney kept going. She made comments about my dress, asking if it was vintage, which is rich people code for old and cheap. She pointed at my necklace, a beautiful piece Luca gave me for our anniversary, and asked if it was costume jewelry. Luca's hand resting on the table curled into a fist. Brandon finally seemed to notice the temperature dropping, but he just kept eating his steak, occasionally chuckling at Courtney's comments like she was being charming instead of vicious. Then Courtney started talking about Luca's past, about women she'd heard he'd been seen with years ago. Elegant women from prominent families, women who went to all the right schools, knew all the right people. She kept saying right like it was a weapon, like there was a right kind of person to be, and I wasn't it. She touched Luca's arm while she talked, let her hand linger there, looked at him with big, innocent eyes like she was just making conversation. But we all knew what she was doing. She was telling me I was the wrong choice, that Luca had downgraded when he married me. I tried to redirect the conversation, brought up a legal aspect of their development project that needed attention, started talking about zoning laws and permit requirements. For a minute, I thought I'd found safe ground. But then Courtney interrupted me, her voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, how cute that you understand these things. Like my law degree was a hobby, like my expertise was adorable instead of valuable." That's when I corrected her. Calmly, professionally. I explained exactly why her understanding of the legal requirements was wrong. I laid out the facts, cited the specific statutes, made it clear that I knew what I was talking about. Her face went from fake sweet to genuinely angry in about 2 seconds. She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. The whole restaurant went quiet. And this woman, this blonde woman in her expensive dress at this fancy table, looked down at me and said the words that changed everything. "You know what you are? You're street garbage. You don't belong here. You don't belong at this table. You certainly don't belong with him." She pointed at Luca, her voice rising. "You're just some project he picked up to feel good about himself, but eventually he'll realize what everyone else can see, that you're trash pretending to be treasure." The silence that followed was absolute. I felt every eye in that restaurant on me, felt the weight of that word. Garbage. I'd been called worse growing up on those Detroit streets, but somehow here in this expensive restaurant, surrounded by crystal and candles, it cut deeper. I stood up slowly. My hands weren't shaking. My voice was steady. "Excuse me," I said. Not to Courtney, to Luca. "I'm going to step outside for some air." Luca rose with me, but I put my hand on his shoulder. "Stay. Finish your business discussion. I'll be fine." His dark eyes searched mine. Then he nodded once, but as I walked away, I heard him speak. His voice was so low I almost missed it. "You made a mistake tonight." It wasn't directed at me. I went outside, let the cool night air hit my face. I wasn't crying, I was thinking, planning. Because here's what Courtney didn't know about me. The streets didn't just teach me to survive. They taught me to fight smart, and I was about to teach her exactly how smart I could fight. I went home that night, and Luca came in 2 hours later. He found me in my office, files spread across my desk. He stood in the doorway, still in his suit, the scent of cigar smoke clinging to his jacket. "Tell me what you need," he said simply. Not an apology for Courtney's behavior, not sympathy, just an offer of resources. That's who Luca was. Action, not words. "Information," I said. "Everything on Courtney Blake." He nodded once. "You'll have it by morning." He turned to leave, then paused. "Gabrielle." I looked up. "She was wrong," he said, his voice carrying that quiet intensity that made people listen. "You're not trash pretending to be treasure. You're the most valuable thing I own, and I don't share." The file arrived at 6 a.m., delivered by a man I'd never met but who clearly worked for Luca. It was thick, detailed, the kind of information you can't get from a simple internet search. Courtney Blake wasn't from high society at all. She'd grown up middle class in Ohio, reinvented herself when she moved to Boston. She'd been through 3 different wealthy boyfriends in the past 5 years, each time playing the perfect girlfriend, trying to secure a ring or at least a generous breakup settlement. She was a con artist in designer clothing. And Brandon wasn't her real target. Luca was. She'd researched him, knew he was wealthier and more powerful than Brandon, saw their partnership as her opportunity to get close. I was just the obstacle in her way. That's why she tried to humiliate me. She thought if she could make Luca see me as beneath him, as embarrassing, he might start to doubt our marriage, might start to see her as the better option. The woman played herself, because what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that I held all the cards. I spent Wednesday morning reviewing every document related to the waterfront project. And that's when I found it, the signature line, my signature line, the one that was still blank, the one that needed to be filed by end of business Friday, or the whole deal would collapse. See, because of the specific zoning requirements and the way the permits were structured, they needed sign-off from a licensed attorney with expertise in corporate real estate law. And I was the only one on record for this project. Without my signature, Brandon's $2 billion dream was dead in the water. I called Brandon on Thursday morning, told him to come to my office. Alone. He showed up at 2, still all smiles and confidence, probably thinking I wanted to apologize or smooth things over. He sat across from my desk, loosened his tie, asked what this was about. I slid the documents across to him, showed him the signature line, my signature line, still blank, showed him the permits, the filings, the requirements, made it crystal clear that without my approval, his project was finished. The confidence drained from his face like water from a broken dam. "Gabrielle," he started, his voice stammering. "Look, Courtney had too much to drink. She didn't mean, oh," I held up my hand. "I don't want excuses. I want solutions." "What do you want?" I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. So I laid out my terms, nice and clear, no room for negotiation. First, Courtney had to issue a public apology, not a private sorry whispered in a corner, a real public statement on social media, acknowledging what she said, apologizing for it, admitting she was wrong. Second, Brandon had to end that relationship immediately. I didn't care about his personal life normally, but I wasn't about to let that woman have access to my husband's business circles, to any opportunity to come at me again. Third, Brandon's company would establish a scholarship fund for underprivileged students pursuing law degrees. $500,000. In my mama's name. Fourth, their development project would include a community investment clause, job training programs for local residents, affordable housing units, partnerships with minority-owned businesses. They were going to build something that actually helped people, not just line their pockets. Brandon's face went through about 17 different emotions: anger, disbelief, panic, resignation. He tried to argue, said I was being unreasonable, that Courtney would never agree, that the community investment would cut into their profits. I just looked at him and said one sentence: "You have until tomorrow at 5. Then I stood up, showing him the door. He sat there for another minute, probably trying to figure out if I was bluffing. But I wasn't bluffing, and he knew it. He could see it in my eyes. I'd learned a long time ago on those Detroit streets that you never make threats you're not prepared to follow through on. Friday morning, my phone rang at 9. It was Brandon. His voice sounded like he hadn't slept all night. Courtney posted the apology an hour ago. I checked her social media. There it was, a long post about being judgmental, about letting jealousy guide her words, about apologizing to me specifically for her disgusting behavior. The comments were already rolling in. People calling her out, dragging her for what she'd said. Her carefully constructed reputation was crumbling in real time. Brandon's voice came back on the line. We broke up this morning. She moved out. And the rest? The scholarship fund is being set up. My lawyers are drawing up the community investment clause. He paused. Will you sign? I let him sit in that silence for a long moment. Let him really feel the weight of what had happened, of how close he'd come to losing everything because his girlfriend couldn't control her racism and classism. My assistant will deliver the signed documents by 4, I said. And I kept my word, because unlike them, when I make a promise, I keep it. That evening, Luca and I sat on our balcony, looking out at the city lights. He'd poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed me one. We didn't speak for a while, just sat there in comfortable silence. Finally, he turned to me. You handled it well. I handled it the only way I could. No. His dark eyes were serious. You could have let me handle it. You chose not to. I looked at him. What would you have done? He was quiet for a moment. Then, with that slight hint of danger in his voice, he said simply, something permanent. I believed him, but that wasn't my way. She needed to understand, I said, not disappear. She needed to see that underestimating me was her biggest mistake, and she needed to live with that knowledge. Luca smiled, rare and genuine. That's why I chose you. You fight smarter than anyone I know. He pulled me close, his hand resting on the back of my neck. You're not street garbage, Gabrielle. You're a queen who conquered the streets, then conquered everything else. See, here's what people like Courtney will never understand. She thought I was street garbage because I came from the streets. But what she didn't know is that the streets taught me everything I needed to survive in her world. They taught me to fight. They taught me strategy. They taught me that dignity isn't about where you're from. It's about who you are when someone tries to take it from you. Courtney looked at me and saw someone beneath her. Someone she could humiliate and dismiss. But she forgot to see the lawyer, the strategist, the woman who climbed out of poverty by being smarter, tougher, and more determined than everyone who tried to keep her down. She forgot that the same skills that got me out of Detroit were the same skills that would bring her whole world crashing down. They always underestimate us, the ones who climb from the bottom. They think we're lucky to be at the table, that we should be grateful just to be in the room. But sometimes we're not just at the table. We own the table. We build it with our own 2 hands, and we decide who gets to sit there. That scholarship fund is going to send 10 students to law school every year. 10 kids who grew up like me, who know what it's like to study by streetlight and eat cereal for dinner and wonder if they'll ever get out. 10 kids who'll become lawyers and doctors and business owners and prove that your zip code doesn't determine your destiny. And every single one of those students will know that fund exists because a woman named Gabrielle Thompson refused to let anyone make her feel small. As for Courtney, last I heard, she left Boston entirely. Guess it's hard to social climb when everyone knows you're a fraud. And Brandon learned a valuable lesson about choosing partners, both business and personal. His project's going forward, and it's actually going to do some good for the community. Sometimes people need to lose everything to learn what really matters. But me, I'm still here. Still Gabrielle Thompson from Detroit. Still the girl who wore the same 3 outfits to school. Still my mama's daughter, except now I'm also the woman who proved that street garbage can be more valuable than all their pedigrees combined. Because I didn't just survive the streets. I conquered them, and then I conquered their world too. Remember, your past doesn't define you, your character does. Your response to disrespect defines you. Your refusal to accept less than you deserve defines you. I'm Gabrielle Thompson, and I'll never let anyone see me break.